Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy, where we talk about all things play therapy. And today I want to talk about Sandplay therapy. Are you using Sandplay therapy or are you using Sandplay therapy? And why does it really matter? Is it tomatoes or tomatoes? And it actually does matter. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I'll share some tips about using play therapy, using Sandplay in play therapy to help children and adolescents heal. So that's our topic today, how to use the Sandplay in play therapy. So if you're joining me, I would love to know who's here. Pop your name in the comments. What population do you work with? Are you using the Sandplay in your office or in your work if you're not in the office? What do you know what Sandplay model you're using or Sandplay? Also, where are you working? What are your thoughts about using Sandplay? So let's go ahead and get started talking about that today. Also, if you find the information helpful, please feel free to share it across your social media platforms. I stream live every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, which is 10 a.m. on the East Coast, on LinkedIn and YouTube, and also simultaneously kind of using my phone to stream on Instagram. So you'll see me going back and forth with my facial, my eyes looking back and forth at the different cameras. Alrighty, so what is the difference between Sandplay therapy and Sandplay therapy? And does it even really matter? And I would say the answer is yes, it does matter, because it gives you an idea of what are the theoretical roots of the approach using Sandplay. And so Sandplay therapy has its roots way several decades ago, back in the, I think it was the 50s, maybe getting started in the 40s, with Margaret Lowenfeld using Jungian psychoanalytic theory with a small tray filled with sand, using little figurines. Her work is with children, inviting them in to make a sand world. So she developed the sand world technique. And then, so it has its roots in psychoanalytic theory, specifically Freudian psychoanalytic theory, working with children. And then at some point, Dora Kalff went to study with Margaret Lowenfeld. And Dora Kalff is the one who is actually took that sand world technique and applied it using a Jungian psychoanalytic lens. And so we actually kind of consider Dora Kalff to be the mother of Sandplay, kind of like we consider Virginia Axline to be the mother of child-centered play therapy. That's how I look at it. And so Sandplay therapy has its roots in a specific model and way of being with clients using the Sandplay, sand, and symbols. And their work also includes adults, adolescents, and children. And so its roots are really in that Jungian psychoanalytical lens. And I think over the years, like most entities, as we've learned more from research, they've integrated in more of what we know from neurobiology and attachment theory, like interpersonal neurobiology. And so they've integrated a lot of that in there.
from what I've observed over the last couple decades. So Sandplay therapy, which is different than Sandplay, because when you're a Sandplay therapist, you go through and get specific certification. It's a lot like saying you're an art therapist because you pull out art supplies, or that as a play therapist, you're doing art therapy in the playroom when you're pulling out and allowing children to use art. And that's not actually correct, because art therapists spend a lot of time studying specific types of theoretical models and applying those theoretical models with art. And so I would say, as a play therapist who is not a trained art therapist, who did my play therapy supervision with a certified art therapist, I would say I use art in play therapy. So I use art to access the therapeutic powers of play within a therapeutic play therapy model. And so I don't refer to myself as an art therapist. I don't refer to myself as a Sandplay therapist, even though I've done a lot of training with people who were trained in the Sandplay model. So kind of some of my roots come there as well, but I didn't go through all of those certification processes, which are going to teach me a specific way of doing it. Kind of like as a play therapist, I have gone through the certification process for that, and I do maintain my certification as a play therapist. So it's kind of like saying you're a play therapist when you're actually using play therapeutically. Maybe you're using play in your process, but you haven't specifically been trained in any play therapy models. It's kind of that way. That's how I think of it. And so in that way, it does matter how you say it. Are you using Sandplay in play therapy, or are you using Sandplay? And so Sandplay therapy is pretty much everything else. So if you're not a Sandplay trained therapist, then you're probably using Sandplay therapy, meaning you have a variety of different models in which you are using the Sandplay, the miniatures, and the sand in your play therapy sessions. For example, as a child-centered play therapist, I would have a sandbox, miniatures, and sand in my office. And when I'm using child-centered play therapy, I'm using that theoretical model with the Sandplay. So there's a specific way in which I show up in the session, how I'm tracking what's going on, how I'm holding that space using a child-centered play therapy model, versus when I'm using more of an integrative approach, using some of the concepts of Jungian psychoanalytic theory that I've learned with the Sandplay process, along with a lot of attachment and neuroscience that I've integrated in using my prescriptive approach to using the Sandplay as more of an integrative or prescriptive model. And then there's a different way in which sometimes I might lead. Sometimes I might provide a directive. If I'm using Sandplay therapy while providing a child-centered approach, then I'm not leading. So you can see how your play therapy model will make a huge difference in how you're using the sand, the sandbox, and the miniatures. And so the other thing that I think is important is really conceptualizing the purpose of the Sandplay. So, and this is going to be heavily influenced by your theoretical model. What is the purpose of having that in there? So Sandplay has its roots, as well as play therapy, has its roots in accessing the symbolic, or if I'm using a neuroscience and attachment lens or that interpersonal neurobiology lens, then I'll say that we're accessing implicit experiences. And then we're using that from a play therapy standpoint to access the therapeutic powers of play. So how is the sand tray making process allowing you to apply a theoretical model to help your clients access those therapeutic powers of play? Because that's what sets play therapy apart from other play therapy modalities. From other expressive arts modalities. Accessing the therapeutic powers of play is what sets play therapy apart from other expressive modalities. For example, sand play therapy, or music therapy, or art therapy. If we're using play therapy, then we are helping our clients to access those therapeutic powers of play through a theoretical model. And so what is the purpose of the sand tray? Well, it's a way that we are helping our clients access those therapeutic powers of play to work through and resolve whatever it is that's going on in their lives that's creating problems. So when I'm using my neuroscience and attachment lens, then I'm conceptualizing the ability to use the sand tray to access those implicit experiences that might be creating distress and getting in the way of healthy integration, creating those strong integrated neural systems that allow for regulation and what we would say homeostasis, right, within my internal system, between that brain body, bilateral integration, all of those ways that we know are important for optimal functioning. And the only way we can access optimal functioning for emotion regulation or self-regulation is by staying within our window of tolerance. Well, maybe we're using the sand tray to access and process through some of those implicit experiences stored away that are interfering with optimal functioning because that integration has not fully developed. I call it big pockets of ookiness stored away in my neural system, right? We integrate. This is where I love that idea of thinking about parts and memory, like those implicit memory experiences. And now we've got these parts that are kind of split off. And if you're using more of a internal family systems lens, theoretical lens, then you're looking at what are these parts? And these parts have gotten split off in my neural integration because some implicit experience is stored away, creating barriers for healthy integration. So from an IFS, internal family systems model, then you're going to look at your protectors, like the managers and the firefighters. You're going to look at the those, what do we call? Oh, I just had the word in my head, the exiled parts. And the idea being that healthy integration to create and facilitate that strong, healthy sense of self with all those 8 C's. I never remember all the 8 C's, but it's compassion, I think it's courage. I don't know. There's a bunch of 8 C's. I always have to pull up my list. So it's just another way, IFS is another way of conceptualizing the way that I look at it, that that those implicit experiences and how they have created havoc, so to speak, on our neurosystem integration, Daniel Siegel talks a lot about the flow of energy and information and the consciousness, which is mind, and the meaning that we've made of things. I've actually been listening to his book on tape, Audible. And then I also have the hard copy. I like to read the hard copy. Listen to the Audible book. And then if there's some real juicy parts, I like to go and pull out the book and really read through the book. But I was listening to the Audible version of Brainstorm. That's the one that's really focused on adolescence, and listening to his discussion from an interpersonal neurobiology standpoint of how these meanings that we make of these autobiographical memories are processed through the right brain, and how we actually need the left brain to anchor in some accuracy. And that would be that bilateral stimulation. If we're also integrating in a little EMDR, right? This would be more of, I'm using this integrative approach to Sandplay, using these theoretical models. That's the purpose for the Sandplay, because I want to use the Sandplay to access those implicit experiences and allow a reworking of them, so to speak, to facilitate that healing. And so for that would be the purpose. How am I conceptualizing the purpose? And it's going to be heavily influenced by my theoretical model. So if I'm using Adlerian play therapy, then I can use the Sandplay, and the purpose of the Sandplay is to facilitate healing in the way that an Adlerian play therapist would make sense of what's going on, how they would use the Sandplay in the session. And so your theoretical model, when you're using the Sandplay, is really, really important, because it influences everything, so to speak. It influences how you make sense of what's going on. It influences the purpose of using the Sandplay process. It influences how you make sense of what's going on and what you're going to do in sessions, and how you tell where you are in the healing process based on what stage of play therapy that you're in. And so that your play therapy model is also going to influence your use of the Sandplay in terms of, are you going to lead or are you following? So leading would mean that you would be giving some directive prompts. You would be directing what you're doing in the session and how you're using that Sandplay. Following means that you are allowing your client to lead. So child-centered play therapy would be following, only following. If you're using Sandplay, you're only following, because the theory is, for both of those models, given the free and protected space, your client will inherently, will naturally, will instinctually move towards healing and wholeness. And so you're going to be so grounded in that firm belief that you're going to follow, because your belief is that your client will show you what they need to do. And really, it doesn't even matter if you get it from these models. It's more about how are they using the process for their healing, because they know how to get there. They would naturally know what symbols to use, how to use the Sandplay. So that would be following. And so part of what you're doing is you're using your theoretical model to guide your decision making in terms of, what are you doing with the Sandplay in that play therapy process. And what I mean by that is, your theoretical model is going to influence, are you leading and are you only leading? Are you following or are you only following, or somewhere in between? Are you sometimes following and sometimes leading? That's all going to be influenced by your theoretical model. And how you hold that Sandplay making process, how you hold each play therapy session, how you hold that Sandplay making process is all going to be influenced by your theoretical model that you're using. And if you're interested, so I am actually going to be doing a play therapy training in December 6th and 7th. I love using a neuroscience and attachment lens in play therapy. So that's going to influence how I hold that process, how I make sense of what's going on in the Sandplay making process. How do I make sense of themes? So play therapy themes is going to be influenced by my theoretical model. And so I created a Sandplay training to help people learn how to use a neuroscience and attachment lens using the Sandplay in play therapy. So if you're interested in that, stick around towards the end. We do a lot of experiential. I keep that training very small, like 10 to 12 people maximum. I only do these in person because especially if we're using a neuroscience and attachment lens, I really think it's important for play therapists to get your hands in that sand, to allow your ability to choose the miniatures and set them up in the sand tray, to have that experience of creating the sand trays, to recognize just how powerful this is. And then we go through and we practice identifying themes and how do you hold that and what do you say, what do you not say. So if you're interested, I will talk a little bit more about that at the end of the play, at the end of this episode, because registration is going to be closing soon. So you'll want, and it's filling up. So if you want a spot, then you'll want to register soon. So that also brings us to the next thing that I was going to talk about today that comes up all the time. And it is really important in the play therapy process to really understand what to do with this topic that I'm going to talk about next, which is identifying themes. How do you identify themes in play therapy sessions? How do you identify the play therapy themes in the sand tray? And what do you do with that information? So play therapy themes is another way of, it's another way of saying like the psychological energy. Psychologically, what is it that is showing up in your client's play therapy session that is influencing? I just realized I didn't have my microphone close enough. So I'm hoping the audio is pretty good. I'll move it closer now. Anyways, so the play therapy themes are really, how do you make sense of what is showing up in the playroom? And that's why identifying themes can be an important skill to learn as a play therapist. I wouldn't say get hung up on it, like so much so that you can't show up therapeutically if you're just trying to focus so much on the theme that you're not even therapeutically present and you miss all kinds of things. I think it's something that you learn, especially something you learn with by going to trainings and finding out how to do that. Also consultation, also reading books. There's some really good books out there that talk about different themes. Like we talk about themes in my Play Therapy Academy, which is my online consultation program. So if you're interested in that, I'll talk a little bit more. I do have some openings for Play Therapy Academy, but themes are the way in which clients are using the play therapy process, and the sand tray, and that it's like the psychological energy that shows up in their play. And we learn to identify themes to help us make sense of what clients are working through in the sand tray making process, or play therapy in particular. Here's the reality of it, though. The client doesn't need you necessarily. I think you could make the case pro or con for what I'm about to say. Your client doesn't necessarily need you to know every little thing, because the theory is, given the free and protected space, they will naturally move towards healing and wholeness. And your play therapy model, most of them would integrate that. What would I call that? Would integrate that premise that we give that free and protected space in play therapy for clients to move towards healing and wholeness. So I say that don't get too hung up on the themes. They're important. I definitely think they're important. Just don't get hung up on them. From a sand tray making process, how you make sense of the themes is going to be influenced by your play therapy model. Again, that's an important thing, is how are you grounding the sand tray work, and what is the theoretical model that you're using, because that's what is going to help you make sense of the themes and what to do with that information once you've figured it out. That being said, before I do that, I have to give you a warning. My dog Luna has just come into my office. If you've listened to any of my episodes previously, you'll know Luna. Once my husband goes off to work, then Luna shows up in my office, and she is now laying on the floor on the carpet, kind of rolling around and moaning. So if you hear any weird sounds in the background, it's my dog Luna. There's nothing weird going on, and you're not hearing things. That's my dog Luna. The thing about themes in play therapy is there are some themes that are pretty typical to most play therapy models. So themes of control, themes of what are some of the other themes? Nurturing, safety, danger, protection, mastery. All of these themes are pretty similar across all play therapy models. And then how you make sense of those themes and why those are happening is going to be influenced by your theory model. So for an Adlerian play therapist, they might look at power and control issues or themes in the play in terms of lifestyle priorities and what needs are they trying to get met. Do I count? Maybe I need some courage to do something differently. So versus maybe if I'm looking at things from a neuroscience and attachment lens, and I'm conceptualizing implicit memories, and attachment, then I'm conceptualizing power and control themes in terms of what is going on and what is my client needing to work through regarding these early implicit experiences and their attachment experiences. So your themes are really going to be influenced by your play therapy theoretical model. And also your model is going to influence how you hold that, How do you hold that information? What do you say? What don't you say? How do you say it? When do you say it? When do you not say it? All of these things are going to be influenced by your play therapy model about how to hold that sand tray making process in play therapy in a way that feels safe and goes at the pace that is important for your client. Important meaning it feels safe for them. So we're looking at our play therapy model to kind of even demonstrate how are we holding it, because from a sand play theoretical model, I'm silent witness. I'm not saying anything. I'm not engaging. From a child-centered play therapy model, I'm tracking. I'm reflecting and tracking what goes on in the session, but I'm not leading. From if I'm using an integrative model, and maybe I'm integrating in some neuroscience and maybe some IFS, maybe some narrative therapy, narrative theory, I might integrate in having the sand tray miniatures talk. I might direct a few things. I might reflect on and maybe stay in the metaphor to get those characters to talk. All of those and are going to be influenced. How do we hold that? It's going to be influenced by your theoretical model. So that is it for today. Today we are talking about how to use the sand tray making process in play therapy. And so just to do a quick recap, understanding the words that you use to describe what you're doing has its roots in explaining what your theoretical model is. So words really do matter in terms of, are you saying are you using sand play or are you using sand tray? And if you're using sand tray, what theoretical models are you using for that sand tray making process? Because that's also how we're conceptualizing the purpose for using that sand tray in the play therapy process. It's going to be influenced by my theoretical model and what we're working to accomplish in that play therapy session. And then that's also my play therapy model is also going to influence, do I follow? Do I lead? And then how am I making sense of these themes? How am I holding these themes? What am I doing with these themes? That's my clinical decision making. Like in child-centered play therapy, I'm not leading at all. Even when I'm reflecting, my reflecting is not leading. If I'm asking questions, I'm leading. So I'm not asking questions. But what I may do is, from a child-centered play therapy standpoint, I may be conceptualizing the purpose of the sand tray is to provide another way for children to access those therapeutic powers of play and use me to anchor that process for them for healing. And then my reflecting is, I may use my decision making as I've maybe identified a theme, and then I might reflect what I'm seeing and what the client is doing, and maybe rooted in a little bit of the language of that theme. And then the client will do with it as they wish. Again, it's a fine line between following and leading, but I'm depending on my play therapy model will influence what am I going to do with the themes. To be honest, I don't really try to identify themes in the play therapy session too much. The older the client, like when we're getting into a little older, like maybe early middle school, high school, adults,
I may do a little bit more reflecting of the themes in there if we're working through some implicit memory experiences or trauma. But I don't typically get too hung up in the themes, because really what I want to do is be present, and I want to be attuned to my client. A lot of times when I figure out the themes is when I'm writing my progress notes, because I'll go back and reflect on what happened in the session. And then from there, I'll think about what the themes were that reflected through those behaviors and the statements and what went on in the session. And that'll help guide my thinking for the next session with that client. So that is it for today. If you're interested in my upcoming training or even Play Therapy Academy, so I do have training coming up. It's an in-person play therapy training in St. George, Utah. Very small number of people, very limited. I really try to keep it kind of retreat-like, where we do a lot of experiential. We do a lot of holding of sand trays and identifying themes and learning what to look for, what to say, when to say it, what not to say, how to hold that process for the client in a way that feels safe, and recognizing those themes in the sand tray. All of that using a neuroscience and attachment lens. So my training coming up is called Using a Neuroscience and Attachment Lens with Sand Tray in Play Therapy. If you're interested in the training or even any other trainings I have coming up, pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. That's rhplaytherapytraining.com. You're going to want to register soon for the using a neuroscience and attachment lens with sand tray and play therapy training, because that one's starting to get full. Also, if you're interested in consultation and you maybe you're pursuing your RPT credential, registered play therapy credential, or maybe you just really are not sure if you want to pursue your RPT credential, but you really want some strong hands-on support for learning how to use play therapy and a theoretical model. Play Therapy Academy is my online, I call it like my VIP consultation program. We meet twice a month. We do case presentations. There's a kind of like a roster of who's presenting when, dedicated time focused on your clients, with not only my 35 years of experience, but you get all of the wisdom and the insights of the other members of the group. And for those of you who think you probably don't know anything, and so you'd be intimidated becoming part of Play Therapy Academy, I would say do not let that stop you, because I have heard pure gold coming out of people who are brand new to Play Therapy Academy, and had so much value to add. So don't let your imposter syndrome keep you from taking the next step for your play therapy skills. If you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. Hop over to the consultation page where you can see Play Therapy Academy. You can find out more information. Schedule a 30-minute video call with me to talk about how Play Therapy Academy can help, or if it'll help, because if it doesn't seem like it's a good fit, that's why we're having the video call, to make sure that it is, if you want to move forward. So schedule your video call if you are interested in Play Therapy Academy. And Luna and I should show a picture. I should post some pictures in Instagram and LinkedIn and in my Facebook group. I think my Facebook group, you've seen some pictures of Luna. Anyway, Luna and I will be back next week. So I will see you then.